Good evening and welcome to another edition of Nevada County Interviews. I'm your host, Paul Minicucci, and tonight we get to talk about one of my very favorite institutions in Nevada County, the Briarpatch Co-op, and specifically we're going to talk about the Briarpatch Shade Pavilion project. And I have with me in the studio four guests. I have Cindy Rubin, Tim Brennan, Marilyn Harden, and Stephanie Mandel. And we'll get to introduce you one at a time a little bit. And they're all connected one way or the other to this project. So I'm going to start with you, Cindy. Tell us where you were born and raised.
I was born in Palo Alto, California, and raised in Los Altos Hills, California.
And how did you come up to become a Nevada County person?
I moved here about 30 years ago for a few years and really liked it, and then left for various reasons and lived other places. And when I needed to move again, right, I thought I'd come back.
That happens to a lot of us, huh? The heart always stays in Nevada County. Tim, how about you? Are you native Northern California?
No, I grew up in New England, mostly southern New Hampshire, and came to California directly after college looking for adventure. And kind of got stuck here. And first I was in the Bay Area, and then later, as I aged, my wife and I decided we wanted to go to a more rural place. And
now, Marilyn, I know you just got here a couple of months ago from Michigan. Is that correct?
About a year ago.
About a year ago.
Last summer.
And you did come from Michigan?
Yes, born and raised there.
And Marilyn's son, Paul, is one of the mainstays at the Briarpatch. So Marilyn is going to do a couple of things tonight. She's going to talk about volunteers and a little bit about the plan that your son had for the native plant garden. Stephanie, you're next. Are you from around here? Or?
Well, I've lived here about 22 years, and I don't know how long you have to live here to be from here, but I think
you're in California. 6 months will count.
But I was born. I grew up in Southern California, but quickly had the wisdom to move north, which is much nicer.
Yeah, and as Tim will tell you, in New Hampshire, you have to be 2 or 3 generations born there before you're accepted. I used to teach in Massachusetts, and they used to say, "Mr. Minicucci, we love you, but you're not from here." Yeah. It was wicked funny. So, Cindy, you actually you also represent the Native Plant Society.
Yes.
Right. Tell us about the Native Plant Society. What's the mission?
The mission of the California Native Plant Society is to protect native plants and their habitats.
Mm-hmm. And so this project, and I think the theme for the show really is Briarpatch is more than a market. It's really a resource, to the county about any number of issues, and one of those happens to be native plants and herbs and spices that we consume here. So tell us, from your perspective, about the pavilion. What's it going to provide for the native plants?
It will provide more of a play. First, it will provide a focal point that will draw people's attention, because even though the garden was started shortly after Briarpatch moved to their new site, and we started planting in the fall of 2007, there are still people who have no idea that there is actually a garden over there.
Right.
And so having the pavilion will get people's attention and draw them over there.
Right.
And then it will also provide a space for them to spend more time hanging out near the space.
Right. So Stephanie, as a marketing person for Briarpatch, is this a great asset for the community? How do you look at this, the new pavilion?
Well, I think it's sort of the culmination for the garden, to all the good work that the Native Plant Society has done as partners with Briarpatch on it. This really culminates their work and makes it an educational center almost, where classes can come and have a place to sit in the shade and have lunch while they learn about the plants there and native plants, and it's just a wonderful partnership, I think.
Yeah, I'm betting you're going to have to beat people off with a stick once the pavilion goes up, because, and it is, I know that the philosophy of the Briarpatch has a lot to do with sustainability, local and regional foods, and really great healthy preparations. And so all those things fit in here, don't they?
Yeah, environmental protection is part of Briarpatch's mission, and it's really a drainage ditch, that area that we had to the county requires that you have drainage, on a building project, but the idea came up, it's partly through Marilyn's son, Paul, our former general manager, to make it into a garden, and we were really lucky that the Native Plant Society was excited about it and took it on.
So standing in for your son, tell us a little bit about how he came up with this idea.
Well, what he tells me is that he was watching as all the bulldozers came in and working up the ground and everything, and thinking some of that ought to be saved where we don't really need it plowed at this point. And he could see there were some wildflowers there and so on, and had this just sort of vision that it would be great to have that developed, but did not feel that he had the time or whatever to know how to do that or to do it when they were trying to get the new Briarpatch co-op running, and was just so grateful that the Native Plant Society came along and said, we'd like to work with you.
Right. And so how did that come about, Cindy? I mean, how did you guys find out about the project?
I'm not actually, I was not in on that initial interaction connection. I know the people who were involved in that were Cindy Brinkhurst and Linda Nowak Carlson, who at the time worked at Peaceful Valley. And so they were the two who brought the idea to the Redbud Chapter's board and presented the idea of having a demonstration garden around the detention basin in the landscape.
And we're going to talk, Tim, a little bit about how this pavilion is going to be built and erected, and we have some slides from your workshop and as well as the foundation building. But right now, I think we're ready to put some slides up that Cindy had sent us, and these are just looking at some of the native plants. And Cindy, if you'll talk about these slides as we're watching them. We're going a little too fast, folks. So
the first one was the bush. That is the bush lupin, also called silver lupin. It's a lovely, locally native shrub lupin. It's a perennial. It's a woody perennial, and that's it in full bloom in the demo garden. It was planted from a gallon-sized container that was propagated locally in the fall of 2007.
That's a great pedigree. Next.
This is the local deer brush, which is a ceanothus, also called California lilac. We're fortunate to have a very nice stand of it at the far end of the garden, as well as several plants within the garden.
Next.
That is creeping sage. We planted that from cuttings in the fall of 2008, if I remember correctly. And this is one of our local critters. This is a northwestern fence lizard, good bug eaters. That is a pretty face. It's actually the dark stained pretty face. These were rescue plants. And this is actually a new listing for our county. This is the locally native iris. One of the two species is the ground iris. This is also a rescue plant. This is the soap plant. This was native right in the garden. It was one of the area that was saved from being bulldozed. And that is the Humboldt lily. This picture was actually taken in my garden, but we have a nice group of them in the demo garden that were also all rescues.
And the entire staff wants to take that picture, and they want the plant too. So, so now you mentioned that some of these plants are rescue plants. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is they were dug up and removed with permission from a construction site.
Right.
So instead of being bulldozed, they were dug up and moved, many of them potted and held over till a good planting time.
Is that one of the functions and mission of Native Plant Society?
Well, it is one of the things that the Native Plant Society can do as part of, say, preserving native plants in their habitats. When a habitat needs to be repurposed for some kind of construction, to me, the ideal is to take out everything that is rescuable, movable, usable, and put it elsewhere.
Right. Now, you brought some plants with you today. Can we get a picture, maybe, of these lovely herbs here? And tell us what these are. This
You know,
one?
that is white hawkweed. It is sort of a small dandelion-type flower. It's native. That's a rescue plant.
Is this edible?
Not that I know of. I'm not an expert on that topic.
And you know, this lovely
That-
little aster. it
That
looks
is
like.
wand aster. It's a native aster. It is its normal time to bloom. It is a moist habitat plant.
Right. I'm used to the more eastern aster, which is more of a bushy kind of thing, a little bit larger flowers. But this is very delicate. Huh?
It's very delicate. This particular specimen is a little floppy. It's been in the shade.
It's a little gangly. And then we have this little yellow flower.
That is California goldenrod, another rescue. One of the nice things about our native California goldenrods is they are all insect pollinated, so they do not cause hay fever problems.
Great. And the two on the floor that we see?
Well, we have another white hawkweed there that actually has a few flowers open on it. Behind it is a red bud that was propagated locally. It's actually the namesake for our local chapter of the Native Plant Society.
Now, one thing I know about California is that it's Northern California particularly, anything grows here. And so one of the issues is always that we have to sort of watch non-native plants because they're liable to take over.
Yes. One of the problems with bringing in exotic plants, whether deliberately or not, is that they don't have all the other components of their ecosystem with them. They don't have the other plants and the creatures that keep them in check. And so I like to say that at least some of the exotics don't play nice away from home.
Right. Right. So it really does take an active, philosophy to be able to guard against intrusion.
Yes, and actually, after development, intrusion and by invasive non-native plants is the next biggest loss of habitat.
How many species of native plants are we going to see in the garden? Can you give an estimate?
We're expecting to have hundreds.
Hundreds. Great. That's wonderful. And here's a book that we want to mention. I asked Cindy to bring some books in that we might want our viewers to read or consult. That's Tahoe Basin.
Yeah, this is considered the Bible of plant identification for the Tahoe region in the higher elevations. This is also an excellent guide to the entire Sierra Nevada and just about everything out there. Yeah, that's a pictorial guide with names and tidbits of information so that you can take just one book out in the field, know what you're looking at, and then read more about it when you go home.
Even I have one of those.
And this is the Redbud Chapter's own book, Wildflowers in Nevada and Placer Counties. It's been in publication for several years now. It covers the plants, the wildflowers in Nevada and Placer counties, from the valley up over the crest.
So, Stephanie, why is Briarpatch so interested in protecting, native plants? And you could just be a market and sell stuff. I mean,
Well, one of the things that a lot of co-ops have a concern for community. It's one of the cooperative principles, and a lot of the co-ops talk about a triple bottom line. You want to make profits, of course, to keep your business from going out of business, and then co-ops also have people and the planet as part of the consideration in the way that we operate.
Right.
And so this is a wonderful way to express that
right.
at our current store.
So you're teaching people about our native, plants and habitat, protection, and hopefully they will, people will become more active in, advocating for that. And I know I've become more aware of what these plants are by going to the Briarpatch. Now, so we've gone to we're at the Briarpatch. We have done some work, Tim. We're going to go into the foundation work here. If you can narrate a little bit what's happening here.
It looks like a bunch of holes in the ground to me.
That's the technical explanation.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So there's 8 posts involved in the structure, each on its own individual pier, and so that's the layout for digging the holes that we saw there.
And next, I know we have more. Okay, what's happening here? We're laying a foundation?
It's a wooden structure to hold up some forms for the individual piers to hold the concrete when it gets poured. And we use these things called sonotubes, which result in a round pier coming out of the ground.
And that's some, the concrete being...
Right. We used a type of concrete that has an element called fly ash in it, which is thought of as environmentally beneficial because it uses a byproduct of coal-generating power plants as part of the concrete mix to replace some of the cement. So it's the green alternative type of concrete, which was used when the main store was built as well.
So here we are. We're putting the pier blocks in, and
that's right. This is the wet concrete. It was myself and Cindy and Marilyn and a lady named Debbie Tatunchi who helped pour that concrete.
Well, kudos to you guys. That's And so we were talking off camera about the size of the pavilion. The footprint's not very big here, is it?
That's right. It's only about 12 by 14 feet. But then with the overhanging wooden portions, it ends up closer to 16 by 20.
Right. And so the intent here is not to be a huge kind of building, but to provide the shade that's necessary in a more intimate kind of setting.
That's right. It's really just big enough for one picnic table, kind of roomy for that, and the space is not large, so we don't want to overwhelm the place where it sits.
And so now before we're going to talk about the volunteers who are absolutely vital to this project, and you saw some of them there. But I think now let's take us into Tim's workshop, if we can, and explain a little bit. Before we do that, let me ask you a little bit about the philosophy. We're using native local timbers for this.
That's right. There's timbers that were purchased from our one remaining local sawmill, Kubich Lumber Company in Grass Valley, and then there were also some round posts, also local incense cedar that were harvested from the land of some local folks who donated the logs. And
so you've been spending the last couple of weeks in the workshop preparing the posts and the pavilion overhang for installation this Sunday.
That's right. We've been the building is involved with wooden joinery, pegged wooden joinery.
Right.
Typically called timber framing as a generic term, and the idea is that it's a timeless sort of construction that doesn't involve the use of nails.
Right. So let's see if we can go to the slides inside Tim's workshop, and there's a slide of your workshop.
That's right. That's it. With the requisite dog.
It's a wonderful building in its own.
It is. So those are a couple of the main larger power tools that are used to cut the timbers. The largest timber involved is a 6 by 12. Yeah, but also hand tools are required to the gross work is done with power tools, but still some work with hand tools is required to finish the joinery.
Okay, some more, and then those are the posts.
That's right.
And those are the local timber that you harvested, right?
Right. Those are incense cedar, and the sawn timber from Kubich Lumber is also. It's an abundant natural resource of Nevada County. Yeah.
And those are the parts of the pavilion that will rest on the timbers.
That's right. Before they were cut.
Yeah.
And now we're out in the yard, drawing the joinery and cutting the joinery.
So why are you choosing to do a more traditional, hand tool? This kind of joint is not typical of people building stuff today. Why do that?
I do it primarily because it's fun for me.
Yeah.
But I'm attracted to it because it is an age-old method, and that it involves an element of craftsmanship that is not a part of everyday building always, and using the local material is, and it seems to fit the place and the intentions of Briarpatch being having an organic component to it and a community spirit.
There's a lovely knot-hole. And when you do that kind of joints, I mean, it really allows the timbers to breathe and, exist with the, the elements. Whereas if you're using nails, eventually the heat and the cold start, recessing nails out and weakens the structure, isn't it?
Well, that can be true, but also I like to think of it that the building has some flexibility about it. So
right.
You got the idea right.
So we have about 4 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit, Marilyn, about volunteers. How do volunteers fit into this whole project?
Well, they fit in many ways. I mean, all the things that Cindy does there and all the people that she works with on the committee that help with the design and so on for the garden are all volunteers. And then there's people like me who help and learn as we go. And then there's people like Tim and all the people that have been out there that you see at his workshop.
Right.
They are all volunteers.
Right. Tim's donating his services to this project, which I'm sure appreciate greatly in Nevada City.
And we're volunteers for the Briarpatch,
right.
With the benefits that brings also,
right.
and the support.
How many volunteers would you say are involved in this project?
Oh, in this project?
I know you got hundreds at
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'm going to guess something like 15 people have been had some hand in it one way or another.
Yeah,
Yes.
15,
And I would imagine, Tim, that you had to do some teaching here, didn't you? I mean, you're not going to pick up volunteers off the street who know that kind of joint work.
It's true, and that was one of my intentions. Once I decided to do it as a volunteer myself, I wanted the whole experience to be a volunteer effort and for it to be sharing. So since I have this particular skill, I wanted to find some people who would be interested in learning it. So I did find some folks who already had carpentry skills but wanted to expand their skill into this arena.
Right. Did the fact that you grew up in New England play a role in your choosing to work with wood, do you think?
I think it did. There are a lot of old timber frame buildings there. My own parents have a timber frame barn in their backyard. It's their quote-unquote garage. And it is much more common to see such buildings there. The timber framing lost out to stud framing in about 1900, so there aren't that many on the West Coast.
Right, right. So it's great to revive that tradition.
Absolutely.
So Stephanie, now Sunday we're going to be erecting this. I know NCTV is going to be there filming it. Tell us about what's going to happen on Sunday.
Well, I guess they're going to start about 9 a.m., they tell me, and go throughout the day until they're done. And it gets dark at 7:30, so you
Bring our lights.
so hopefully it'll be by then. But I think Tim was telling me he thought the most interesting part, people could come and watch.
Right.
Tim and his crew are encouraging people to come and watch, but not to help, but just to watch. They've got it handled, under control.
Right.
And you said, Tim, maybe 10:30 to 1 you thought might be the most interesting part of the process?
Yeah. Let's say 10 to 2. It will be the most dramatic portion of the building. Yeah.
When the posts go up and the wood
rooms.
just fits perfectly.
That's right.
Yeah.
There will be no problems at all.
Okay,
It's
great.
gonna,
So other than the raising of the structure, is Briarpatch planning any kind of ceremony to open it or to bless it or to introduce it to the community? You know?
Well, we appreciate NCTV putting it out to the community, and
We like TV events, so I'm sort of urging you. Maybe we could.
well, we'll get something going impromptu if we have to.
Right. Well, I think it's going to, it's a wonderful asset, and trying to get the community to really pay attention to it being there. Because I'm willing to bet, as you mentioned, Cindy, most people don't know that the garden's there at all. This will really focus them on that. But
Yes.
and I'm betting, like I said, that people are going to really hang out there. I really think it's quite a nice addition to what Briarpatch does. So we have about 2 minutes left. What other projects does the Native Plant Society have in the works that we want the viewers to know about? Anything special?
We do have a plant sale coming up on October 15th.
And you have plants that you've rescued from our friends doing the highway construction?
What's that?
The highway construction, where plants are being bulldozed and...
Well, probably if I get them ready, some of them will be for sale there. Mostly they come in from various native plant nurseries. They come in as vendors. The sale will be at Sierra College in Grass Valley.
Mm-hmm. And is this a society a totally volunteer effort, or do you have paid staff?
The state office has some paid staff in Sacramento. As far as I know, our chapter is completely volunteer. I believe that some of the chapters may have part-time paid positions, but I'm not sure about that.
Well, we got about 1 minute left, so we're going to have to wrap it up here. Thank you all for coming. Cindy, Tim, Marilyn, Stephanie, appreciate your coming out. So we look forward to seeing you again on Sunday, and I hope people can come by and watch. So right now, this is Paul Minicucci saying to you, that's all we have time for. We are going to be reviving our traumatic brain injury series very soon, so look forward to some of that activity going on. Meantime, I'm signing off for now. Bye-bye.
Here at the library, people ask a lot of questions.
I'm trying to get a job, but I don't write very well. Can the library help me?
The Read Up department can help. They teach adults how to read and write. Check out the kiosk in the lobby for more information.
Hi, I'm looking for bedtime books for my boy. Benny is 4 and Tom is 12, and Benny likes choo-choo trains. Tom likes zombies.
Choo-choo trains and zombies.
Oh, do you have any activities for my boy?
Sure! Workshops, sing-alongs, and your boys can even read to a dog.
I just lost my job. Can you help me write a resume?
No, but I can help you find a book that can. Here you go.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
My computer's broken and I'd like to get to my Facebook account. Can I use one of these computers?
Sure.
How much does it cost to rent a movie here?
It's free. We also have audiobooks, CDs, and no, our video cassette collection has not gone away.
Dude, I have SATs tomorrow. I need help.
Here's the SATs and the bar exam for when you graduate college.
You're the man.
Good luck. You see what I mean? People have a lot of questions. Whether you're looking to improve yourself, need to find the perfect bedtime story, or just need a good novel to read, the local library has all your answers. Excuse me, I've got a book to read.
Thank you for being here. And I say thank you for being here because I was silent for 17 years. And the first words that I spoke were in Washington, D.C. on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, and my family and friends had gathered there to hear me speak. And I said, "Thank you for being here." My mother, out in the audience, she jumped up, "Hallelujah, Johnny's talking." Imagine if you were quiet for 17 years and your mother was out in the audience. She would say. My dad said to me, "That's one." I'll explain that. But I turned around because I didn't recognize where my voice was coming from. I hadn't heard my voice in 17 years, so I turned around and I looked and I said, "God, who's saying what I'm thinking?" And then I realized it was me, you know, and I kind of laughed. And I could see my father, yeah, he really is crazy. Well, I want to take you on this journey, and the journey, I believe, is a metaphor for all of our journeys. And so even though this one is a kind of unusual, I want you to think about your own journey. My journey began in 1971 when I witnessed 2 oil tankers collide beneath the Golden Gate, and 500,000 gallons of oil spilled into the bay. It disturbed me so much that I decided that I was going to give up riding and driving in motorized vehicles. That's a big thing in California. And it was a big thing in my little community of Point Reyes Station in Inverness, California, because there was only about maybe 350 people there in the winter. This was back in 71 now. And so when I came in and I started walking around, people, they just knew what was going on, and people would drive up next to me and say, "John, what are you doing?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm walking for the environment." And they said, "No, you're walking to make us look bad, right? You're walking to make us feel bad." And maybe there was some truth to that, because I thought that if I started walking, everyone would, follow. Because of the oil, everybody talked about the pollution. And so I argued with people about that. I argued and I argued. I called my parents up. I said, "I've given up riding and driving in cars." My dad said, "Why didn't you do that when you were 16? I didn't know about the environment then. They're back in Philadelphia. And so I told my mother, "I'm happy, though. I'm really happy." She said, "And if you were happy, son, you wouldn't have to say it." Mothers are like that. And so on my 27th birthday, I decided, because I argued so much and I talked so much, you see, that I was going to stop speaking for just one day, to give it a rest. And so I did. I got up in the morning and I didn't say a word. And I have to tell you, it was a very moving experience, because for the first time, I began listening in a long time. And what I heard, it kind of disturbed me, because what I used to do when I thought I was listening was I would listen just enough to hear what people had to say and think that I knew what they were going to say, and so I stopped listening, and in my mind I just kind of raced ahead and thought of what I was going to say back while they were still finishing up. And then I would launch in. Well, that just ended communication. So on this first day, I actually listened, and it was very sad for me, because I realized that for those many years I had not been learning. I was 27. I thought I knew everything. I didn't. And so I decided I'd better do this for another day. And another day, and another day, until finally I promised myself for a year I would keep quiet, because I started learning more and more, and I needed to learn more. So for a year I said I would keep quiet, and then on my birthday I would reassess what I had learned, and maybe I would talk again. Well, that lasted 17 years. Now, during that time, that 17 years, I walked and I played the banjo, and I painted, and I wrote in my journal, and I tried to study environment by reading books, and I decided I was going to go to school. So I did. I walked up to Ashland, Oregon, where they were offering an environmental studies degree. It's only 500 miles. And I went into the registrar's office and... What? I had a newspaper clipping. Oh, so you really want to go to school here? You don't... we have a special program for you. They did. And in those 2 years, I graduated with my first degree, a bachelor's degree, and my father came out. He was so proud. He said, listen, we're really proud of you, son. But what are you going to do with a bachelor's degree? You don't ride in cars, you don't talk. You're going to have to do those things. I hunched my shoulder, I picked my backpack up again, and I started walking. I walked all the way up to Port Townsend, Washington, where I built a wooden boat, rowed it across Puget Sound, Idaho, walked across Washington, Idaho, and down to Missoula, Montana. I had written the University of Montana 2 years earlier and said I'd like to go to school there. I said I'd be there in about 2 years. And I was there. I showed up at 2 years, and I tell this story because they really helped me. There's two stories in Montana. And the first story is I didn't have any money. That's a sign I used a lot. And they said, oh, don't worry about that. The director of the program said, come back tomorrow. Gave me $150, and he said, register for one credit. You're going to go to South America, aren't you? And I said, rivers and lakes, the hydrological system, South America. So I did that. He came back, he said to me, he said, okay, John, now that you've registered for that one credit, you can have a key to an office, you can matriculate, you're matriculating, so you can use the library, and what we're going to do is we're going to have all of the professors allow you to go to class, they're going to save your grade, and when we figure out how to get you the rest of the money, then you can register for that class and they'll give you the grade. Wow, they don't do that in graduate schools, I don't think. But I use that story because they really wanted to help me. They saw that I was really interested in environment, and they really wanted to help me along the way. And during that time, I actually taught classes without speaking. And I had 13 students when I first walked into the class, and I explained with a friend who could interpret my sign language that I was John Francis. I was walking around the world. I didn't talk, and this is the last time this person's going to be here interpreting for me. All the students sat around and they went. I could see they were looking for the schedule to see when they could get out. I had to take that class with me. 2 weeks later, everyone was trying to get into our class. And I learned in that class because I would do things like this. And they're all gathering around, go, what's he trying to say? I don't know. I think he's talking about clear cutting. Yeah, clear cutting. No, that's not clear cutting. That's, he's using a handsaw. Well, you can't clear cut with a hand. Yes, you can clear cut. No, I think he's talking about selective forestry. Now, this was a discussion class, and we were having a discussion. I just backed out of that, and I just kind of kept the fist from flying. But what I learned was that sometimes I would make a sign, and they said things that I absolutely did not mean. But I should have. And so what came to me was, if you were a teacher and you were teaching, if you weren't learning, you probably weren't teaching very well. And so I went on. My dad came out to see me graduate, and, I did the deal, and my father said, we're really proud of you, son, but you know what he went on. He said, you got to start riding and driving and start talking. What are you going to do with a master's degree? I hunched my shoulder. I got my backpack, and I went on to the University of Wisconsin. I spent 2 years there writing on oil spills. No one was interested in oil spills, but something happened. Exxon Valdez. And I was the only one in the United States writing on oil spills. My dad came out again. He said, I don't know how you do this, son. I mean, you don't ride in cars, you don't talk. My sister said, maybe I should leave you alone because you seem to be doing a lot better when you're not saying anything. Well, I put on my backpack again. I put my banjo and I walked all the way to the East Coast, put my foot in the Atlantic Ocean. It was 7 years and 1 day it took me to walk across the United States. And on Earth Day, 1990, my 20th anniversary of Earth Day, that's when I began to speak. And that's what I said, thank you for being here, because it's sort of like that tree in the forest falling in, and if there's no one there to hear, does it really make a sound? And I'm thanking you, and I'm thanking my family, because they had come to hear me speak. And that's communication. And they also taught me about listening, that they listened to me. And it's one of those things that came out of the silence, the listening to each other. Really very important. We need to listen to each other. Well, my journey kept going on. My dad said, that's one, and I still didn't let that go. I worked for the Coast Guard, was made a UN Goodwill Ambassador. I wrote regulations for the United States. I mean, I wrote oil spill regulations. I mean, 20 years ago, someone had said to me, John, listen, do you really want to make a difference? Yeah, I want to make a difference. He said, you just start walking east. Get out of your car and just start walking east. And as I walked off a little bit, and they said, yeah, and shut up too. You're going to make a difference, buddy. How could that be? How could that be? How could doing such a simple thing like walking and not talking make a difference? Well, my time at the Coast Guard was a really good time. And after that, I only worked 1 year. I said, that's enough. 1 year is enough for me to do that. I got on a sailboat and I sailed down through the Caribbean and walked through all of the islands and to Venezuela. And I forgot the most important thing, which is why I started talking, which I have to tell you. I started talking because I had studied environment. I had studied environment at this level, this formal level, but there was this informal level. And the informal level, I learned about people and what we do and how we are. And environment changed from just being about trees and birds and endangered species to being about how we treated each other. Because if we are the environment, then all we need to do is look around us and see how we treat ourselves and how we treat each other. And so that's the message that I had, and I said, well, I'm going to have to spread that message. And so I got in my sailboat, sailed all the way through the Caribbean. It wasn't really my sailboat. I kind of worked on that boat. Got to Venezuela, and I started walking. This is the last part of this story, because it's how I got here, because I still didn't ride in motorized vehicles. I was walking through El Dorado. It's a prison town, famous prison or infamous prison in Venezuela. And I don't know what possessed me, because this was not like me. There I am walking past the guard gate, and the guard stops and says, "Pasaporte, pasaporte," and with an M16 pointed at me. And I looked at him and I said, "Passport? Huh. I don't need to show you my passport. It's in the back of my pack. I'm Dr. Francis. I'm a UN ambassador, and I'm walking around the world." And I started walking off. What possessed me to say this thing? The road turned into the jungle. I didn't get shot. And I started saying, "Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last." What was that about, I'm saying? What was that about? It took me 100 miles to figure out that in my heart, in me, I had become a prisoner. I was a prisoner, and I needed to escape. The prison that I was in was the fact that I did not drive or use motorized vehicles. Now, how could that be? Because when I started, it seemed very appropriate to me not to use motorized vehicles. But the thing that was different was every birthday I asked myself about silence, but I never asked myself about my decision to just use my feet. I had no idea I was going to become a UN ambassador. I had no idea I would have a PhD. And so I realized that I had a responsibility to more than just me, and that I was going to have to change. You know, we can do it. I was going to have to change. And I was afraid to change because I was so used to the guy who only just walked. I was so used to that person that I didn't want to stop. I didn't know who I would be if I changed. But I know I needed to. I know I needed to change because it would be the only way that I could be here today. And I know that a lot of times we find ourselves in this wonderful place where we've gotten to, but there's another place for us to go. And we kind of have to leave behind the security of who we've become and go to the place for who we are becoming. And so I want to encourage you to go to that next place, to let yourself out of any prison that you might find yourself in, as comfortable as it may be, because we have to do something now. We have to change now. As our former vice president said, we have to become activists. So, if my voice can touch you, if my actions can touch you, if my being here can touch you, please let it be. And I know that all of you have touched me while I've been here. So, let's go out into the world and take this caring, this love, this respect that we've shown each other right here at TED, and take this out into the world, because we are the environment, and how we treat each other is really how we're going to treat the environment. So I want to thank you for being here. And I want to end this in 5 seconds of silence. Thank you.
I'd unravel every riddle for any individual in trouble or in pain.
Do you know what a straw man argument is? It's when you present your opponent's viewpoint as something it is not, preferably something absurd. That's the straw man. Then you attack the straw man that you have created. When you're done taking the straw man apart, you claim that you've won the argument. It's a time-honored technique, one that debaters and lawyers have known for centuries. Let's take a look at how deniers have used this to deceive people.
Here we're looking at the ice core record from Vostok, and in the red we see temperature going up from early time to later time at a very key interval when we came out of a glaciation. And we see the temperature going up, and then we see the CO2 coming up. CO2 lags behind that increase. It's got an 800-year lag, so temperature is leading CO2 by 800 years.
So the fundamental assumption, the most fundamental assumption of the whole theory of climate change due to humans is shown to be wrong.
The straw man here is that climate scientists say throughout history CO2 has always and in every case been the single controlling factor of global temperature. The reason that's a straw man is nobody says that. Ever since scientists realized that the Earth's ice sheets have expanded and contracted many times over the last 3 million years, they have wondered what would possibly have been the cause of these grand climatic cycles. We're reasonably sure it's not this. By the 1970s, several peer-reviewed studies confirmed the current view that long-term changes in Earth's orbit and rotation have been the timer, the initial forcing, that moves the planet into and out of glacial periods. They were named Milankovitch factors, after Milutin Milankovic, the Serbian mathematician who first advanced the theory. There are 3 main factors. The first one is precession. This refers to the slow change in the direction of Earth's axis of rotation, much like a rotating top. The process takes about 22,000 years. The second factor is obliquity. Obliquity is the subtle change in the actual angle of the axial tilt from 22.1 to 24.5 degrees, which occurs over about 41,000 years. The third is eccentricity, in which the shape of the Earth's orbit changes from nearly circular to more elliptical or egg-shaped over about 100,000 years. The cycles sometimes work together and sometimes cancel each other out, but the end result is about every 100,000 years the planet goes into and out of a glacial period that we call an ice age. The last time they were in effect, they helped take us out of an ice age from 20,000 to 11,000 years ago. They will not be significant again until 20 to 30,000 years in the future, when another major cooling will begin. But there were some weaknesses in the theory. In the 80s and 90s, scientists like James Hansen of NASA and others worked to understand how such a relatively weak forcing could cause the kind of major global changes that would produce large planetary effects. They understood that other factors were at work to amplify the change. For instance, changes in snow and ice cover alter the absorption of heat, amplifying a temperature change. But how could changes taking place primarily in the northern hemisphere be spread over the whole planet? The missing link, they predicted, was that the increased warming of water and soils released greenhouse gases, CO2 and methane. Hansen and his group wrote in 1990, "Changes in CO2 and methane content have played a significant part in the interglacial climate changes by amplifying the relatively weak orbital forcing and constituting a link between northern and southern hemisphere climates." To prove the truth of this sequence of changes, Hansen and his team called for more ice core studies and more accurate measurements. It is these studies that have given us enough detail to show whether Hansen was right about greenhouse gas effects, and these very studies are the ones deniers have chosen to cherry-pick and distort. Those who have watched this series for a while know that I always like to go to the source of any claim that climate deniers make. In this case, a study by Nicholas Kalon, published in Science in March of 2003, which of course we'll actually read. It's titled, "Timing of Atmospheric CO2 and Antarctic Temperature Changes Across Termination 3. Termination 3 refers to the warming that brought the planet out of a previous glacial period, 240,000 years ago. What the graph shows is good support for Milankovitch theory, as well as Hansen's prediction. Orbital factors begin a long, slow warming trend, which causes the outgassing of CO2 and methane from oceans and soils, reinforcing and amplifying the weak orbital warming and creating dramatic global change. The study says the sequence of events is in full agreement with the idea that CO2 plays, through its greenhouse effect, a key role in amplifying the initial orbital forcing. And the situation at termination 3 is different from recent anthropogenic CO2 increase. We should distinguish between internal influences, such as deglacial CO2 increase, and external influences, such as anthropogenic CO2 increase, on the climate system. Although the recent CO2 increase has clearly been imposed first as a result of anthropogenic activities, it naturally takes, at termination 3, some time for CO2 to outgas from the ocean once it starts to react to a climate change that is felt first in the atmosphere. And finally, the sequence of events during this termination is fully consistent with CO2 participating in the latter 4,200 years of the warming. The radiative forcing due to CO2 may serve as an amplifier of the initial orbital forcing, which is then further amplified by fast atmospheric feedbacks that are also at work for the present and future climate. Could they have made it any clearer? Let's review. We know that orbital forces have not acted significantly in 10,000 years, nor will they for another 30,000. We know that the sun has not been a significant factor in the last 50 years. We've seen how James Hansen and his team predicted the interplay of orbital effects and greenhouse gases 10 years before the actual data became available. And we've seen how the very study climate deniers hope you won't read is used to twist and distort the debate, when in fact it proves how well climate scientists have understood and predicted greenhouse effects. The majority of climate deniers are unknowing pawns who have been manipulated by fear and ignorance to continue spreading a few carefully crafted propaganda memes. As I've studied this debate, the wonder has always been the depths of dishonesty and cynicism that are common practice among the paid professional denier community. Let's continue to cut through the ignorance and spread the truth right here every week.
NCTV thanks the following station underwriters for their generous support. B&C True Value Home and Garden Center. For more than 60 years, striving to meet the needs of their customers and our community.